Welcome and thanks for joining us for this webinar, From Zero to Hero, Protecting Your Business with Cybersecurity Training. I'm your host for this webinar, Sophia Goodwin, and looking forward to diving into this topic today. And with me, of course, is Mr. Anthony Sequeira. Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing great, Sophie. Thank you so much for inviting me on today. We are going to have a great time as we discuss one of the huge challenges that all enterprises face today, and that is keeping things secure and keeping security incidents to a place where they don't majorly disrupt operations. And a recurring theme today, costs tons of money.
Right, absolutely. And it all comes back to money, right? Because money
Yes.
talks. And I feel like you think of maybe cybersecurity and you think of like the IT department and things, but it really does, spread to an entire business. So you mentioned money. What exactly is the issue here that we're talking about today? What's the big deal?
So here's one of the just statistics that we have to share with you that really blew my mind when I saw it. And that is the fact that estimated for 2023 alone. So we're not talking like a decade's worth of time here, or 5 years or a 2-year period. We're talking a 1-year period. The estimate is that cybersecurity incidents are going to cost American corporations 8 trillion. Actually, it's a global figure, but this is an astounding amount of money that we're talking about when it comes to cybersecurity incidents. And I think, Sophie, what happens with a lot of people is they see a number like this and they immediately begin thinking of, as you alluded to, attacks against IT infrastructures and maybe attacks that result from an IT department not patching a router or not updating something. But what's really remarkable is that 95% of all of these attacks, of all of these cybersecurity attacks, if you add them all up, an overwhelming majority of them are a result of human error. Now, again, falling in that number could be someone failing to update some key security device. But what's really frightening is that almost all of this 95% isn't that. It is social engineering types of attacks that are leveraging all kinds of different employees throughout the organization. As we'll see, these attacks don't just hit the IT department.
And so a lot of this does come back, like you said, to human error. So we kind of know maybe where these attacks or how these people are able to get in, how these attackers are able to get in. But what type of attacker are we talking about here?
Yeah, so we are talking about a wide variety of attackers today. That's another huge challenge for us, Sophie, is that when it comes to who might be social engineering against the various departments of our organization, it's not just a select few group of individuals anymore. What we've discovered today is that we're seeing more and more varied attackers than ever before. We have state-sponsored attackers now. This was something we didn't tend to deal with decades ago in the context of cybersecurity, but now we're seeing this more and more, where the individuals are highly trained, they are highly funded oftentimes by their state-sponsored organization, and they are looking to cause major disruption and major chaos out there inside of organizations. How about script kiddies? How about those that are just fooling around? Probably the polar opposite of a state-sponsored actor, but they're out there. They're out there just seeing if they can penetrate systems or seeing if they can emulate attacks that they have learned about. There's hacktivists. This is really scary because they're supremely motivated to attack someone and cause all kinds of damage, maybe even data loss. And they're doing so because they strongly believe in some kind of a purpose that they're into. Maybe they have discovered that there's been animals used in experiments and they're big for animal rights. So now they are trying to cause chaos for an organization based on that cause. There's insiders. This has always been a really troubling aspect for cybersecurity when we have people with administrative privileges or individuals inside our organizations that know how to elevate their privileges to an administrator level, causing damage inside of the organization.
And this is just a small sample, I guess, of the different categories, right? Because there's like even like cyber
It
terrorism.
sure is. This list goes on and on and on. There's probably 14 to 16 different categories that we teach here in our full-blown cybersecurity courses.
And some
So this is
overlap
just,
too, right?
yeah, absolutely, and tons of overlap. So you'll have a state-sponsored actor who's also looking to make financial gain, for instance. In fact, that's another thing we should discuss, Sophie. What motivations are there? A lot of times it used to be really relegated to, oh, we got attacked. They wanted money, right? That was the recurring theme. They're trying to steal something, they're trying to ransom our data. But we have to understand that it's not just financial gain anymore. A lot of times these attacks are to gain notoriety. Look how incredibly smart I am. I made it through the CIA's cybersecurity defenses, these kinds of things. There's vendettas. So we see this a lot with the insider attacks where someone feels like, oh, I wasn't listened to when I was working at XYZ company, or I wasn't treated fairly. So now they're out to do damage. And how about competitive advantage? This happens a lot, and it tends to happen, I notice, with security vendors sometimes, where employees of one security vendor will attack another security vendor's systems. And they're smart. They know that if the security breach is made public, there'll be a reduced confidence in that security vendor that they attacked. So again, to Sophie's point, this is just a small sampling of the motivations that might exist today when it comes to us being attacked from a cybersecurity perspective.
And maybe a lot of overlap between some of these categories, the Venn diagram of these
Sure.
categories, right? Maybe there's overlap with the motivations or the type of attacker we're talking about. But you mentioned earlier that 95% of these attacks come back to human error. So that's one common thread, I guess, here is a lot of times that human error is how they're able to access what they need to access.
Yep.
So you also mentioned social engineering, right? That's kind of the main factor at play here.
Yes. Yes. And social engineering is so unique, Sophia, because it's not technical in nature. That's one of the interesting things about it. And one of the things that we know about social engineering is it's really leveraging who people are as human beings, right? Their emotions, their desires, etc. It all hinges around an exploit of trust. So we have someone that is trying to, portray a trusted individual, and it is remarkable how often this works. And I really do think it is because of human nature.
Because it could be if you're dealing with like an insider threat, it could be somebody you trust because you work with them, or you get those
Exactly.
spam phone calls, right? Where it's like, we're calling from the police department or your bank, and you have a level of trust because that's like an authority figure, right? Or somebody that they're calling from the bank. I trust my bank. So
Yeah.
if you think they're calling from the bank, you are exploiting some kind of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm one of those people, you and I were talking about this before we went on. Like, one of the things with me personally is that I'm always complying, right?
Yeah.
So I'm constantly like, I have to comply with this. I have to do this. When the surveys are sent out here at ACI Learning of our internal employees, I have it filled out in the first 5 minutes because I'm just all about compliance. It's just my big thing. And that makes me very vulnerable to these types of attacks. Something, as we mentioned too, is psychological techniques are used here. In a lot of the cases that we read about, it's almost threatening, right? Like, we need your username and password right away. I heard Daniel, our resident cybersecurity expert, I heard him telling a story right here at the office this morning where they were calling him about a massive financial transaction that was about to hit one of his accounts. And it was really like pressing. Did you authorize this transfer? Now, that happened to be legitimate, but it made me think of that's exactly what the attacker would do.
And it
Is
sounded like his like approach to it was that he was like, really, there's a massive transfer. And he like was asking questions and
Yeah.
taking the approach of like, this might not be legit, which is probably smart, right?
That's it. And we'll cover this in a moment, but I know this is scary to think about, all these bad actors that are using these very effective techniques against us, but there are things that we can immediately do to combat this. And we'll get into that. And sure enough, that's what Daniel did. The first thing he said was, I need you to prove to me that you are from XYZ company.
You mentioned earlier, it's like they're preying on human nature, right? Whether that's like your nature to you want to be in compliant, you want to be following the rules and doing what you're supposed to do. Whether it's my human nature to be, maybe I want to be compassionate and I want to be helpful, and I feel bad when somebody says I need help or can you help me with something. So it's really you're preying on emotion and human vulnerability, right?
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, this makes me think of a dear family friend. She's in her late 70s now. And yes, I'm like the adopted son that helps her with her computer all the time. And she allowed these computer criminals in. And when I was talking to her, one of the things that came out of the discussion was, yeah, they called me at 7 p.m. on a Friday, I think she said. And I was like, well, why is that an issue? And she said, well, that's my happy hour. So she was a little tipsy when they called, and that made her all the more willing to give her the keys to
Wow.
her Windows 10 system. So
Jeez.
not good.
Ideal target right there. Yeah.
Thankfully, we don't celebrate happy hours here at ACI Learning. So, Sophia, there's a bunch of common techniques that are used here. One of them is pretexting. Now, I know you've worked with this and you understand what that is. So can you remind me what pretexting is?
So from what I understand, pretexting is basically where you're setting up, you're fabricating some kind of a scenario or an identity for yourself in order to establish some kind of trust and bait somebody, right? So like I'm calling from your IT department and we need to, remote access your computer. We need to install some software and update something to make sure you're in compliance, right? And
Gotcha.
you're pretexting, you're setting up a scenario, right? There's an issue and I'm setting up my identity. I'm from your IT department. You can trust me. So it sounds like that comes into a play a lot of times with social
It
engineering.
does, yeah. And you just reminded me with the larger, more successful attacks, they've got this elaborate
Yeah.
plan. Yeah. So there'll be the initial reach out, the initial pretexting, and then it gets more involved and more involved. And think about it. They may be talking to you on the phone. They may be emailing you at the same time. They may be chatting with you in some kind of a chat interface. So with all this pretexting buildup, it just starts to look more and more legitimate. I just thought of something too. We have to remember that since COVID, we got a bunch of problems. One of the problems is remote work. Remote work is now so much more common. So that puts us at much greater risk for this. And another factor too, I think, post COVID is that these computer criminals are relying on this more than ever. That this is like a big deal that they are competing against each other to make money off of potential victims.
You mentioned remote work as being something that it's become a problem because it makes it easier for attackers to be able to do this or it makes us more vulnerable.
Sure.
And you mentioned Daniel earlier talks a lot about how security is kind of on a sliding scale. And on one side is ease of use and then the other side of security. So
Exactly.
maybe working remotely, it's great for us as people because it offers ease for us. It makes it easier for us to get work done. But because it's that sliding scale, you probably are dealing with weakened security. then.
Exactly. And, my gosh, even in smaller companies today, we're running into situations where you may have never met your IT department.
Mhm.
Even though it's like three guys, you've never met them because maybe you've never gone in the office. So all these kind of scenarios set up more vulnerability. Now, a huge aspect of social engineering is phishing. And I think phishing is kind of one of those ones where we don't take it all that serious anymore. And that's because so many people know about it. We just kind of assume, well, no one would fall for that. Everyone knows about phishing scams. No one's going to fall for that. Many of the most devastating cybersecurity attacks have started with a phishing breach. So this is still a huge problem. And just like all these cybersecurity incidents we're talking about, the perpetrators of these actions have gotten much better at them. This just happened to me, Sophie, where I got a Bank of America phishing scam email. And sure, I recognized it right away by the source email address. So I knew it was illegitimate right away, thanks to that. But I just looked at the email itself and I was amazed because all I could think of is if someone's not educated about this, they're falling for it. It was so identical to what something Bank of America would actually send out. We remember when phishing scams really first started, you didn't have to do much inspection at all. You could just read the poor grammar of the supposed legitimate document and immediately go, well, this is not legit. I mean, this hasn't even been basically spell checked. So this can't be coming from this entity. But just like anything, unfortunately, the perpetrators have gotten better at it.
And phishing is when we talk about that's like email links and malicious websites and stuff. But
Exactly.
it now is like it's expanded to now there's like vishing, VoIP phishing, where it's phone calls.
Great point.
There's smishing, where it's SMS phishing. So
Great point.
It's like a much wider attack surface.
That's right. A lot of our end users, they're not even aware that they could be sent a nefarious link through their SMS, because they never thought of that as an attack vector. They're thinking about, ooh, email is where they can get me. Email is where they can get me. So one of your employees may get something from the IRS via SMS, and they may fall for that instantly. And maybe they've been educated on the IRS will never voice phone call you, but they're like, oh, they're texting me. Okay, that must be what they do now.
Right.
And just so we're all clear on that, I have great experience with this. Unfortunately, the IRS either writes you or shows up at your house. That's how that works, right? So they are not going to text you or email you. They've never shown up at my house, but they have sent me stuff. Yeah. All right. So yeah, if they show up at your house, you're probably in big trouble. So baiting, boy, we see this a lot. And my mom just fell for this. I think I was telling you, Sophie, she was searching for kayaks online to buy us a kayak. And sure enough, her cookies on her computer made it so that when she logged into her Facebook, there was a kayak for sale, $79 for a brand new kayak. She sent the money in. She got a photograph of a kayak. Yeah, I'm surprised she got anything. I was like, Mom, be excited. You got something. Hang that photograph up. So this was a classic baiting. And if my mom had realized that kayaks sell between $400 and $4,000, she would have realized, wait a minute, I shouldn't take this bait. There's no such thing as a $79 brand new kayak. So baiting is putting those things out there that a lot of users can't resist. And we are talking about corporate environments, but you can only imagine how successful this is at home, in home environments with teens. You tell a teenager that all they have to do is click a button to win an Xbox, they're clicking the button.
I remember playing like games on the computer as a kid, and there would be maybe a website I visited that was less than legit, and I didn't know because I was 10. And there'd be a window that would pop up that would say, "You've won an iPad. Quickly fill out this form and click the button." And it's asking for information. And luckily, I was at least aware enough to not do that and immediately click out of the website and just hope I didn't get in trouble. But that would be kind of like baiting because they're looking at taking advantage of curiosity or greed, right? Like, you've won something. Click this button. It's that easy.
Yep. And Sophie, as you pointed out when we were getting ready for this presentation, not all of this stuff is in a cyber arena. In other words, it's in the physical world. And tailgating is a great example of that. With tailgating, I might be going into a secured area here at ACI Learning, and Sophie could just sneak right in behind me. Or even, as Sophie pointed out, how about the case where someone goes, hold that door for me? So they have official looking. It happens here a lot. We just had today the fire inspector out testing our fire suppression equipment. In fact, I just realized this. I saw him and completely held the door for him based on his official uniform. I didn't ask for credentials. I didn't even go check in with our IT department resident expert here to see if they should be there. I did find out later they were supposed to be here, but still. So these are very easy things to fall for. I'm falling for them every day. And we'll see in a moment how impersonation can be a big one. In fact, Sophie, you mentioned earlier how a lot of these things overlap. Obviously, on these common techniques of attack, you see overlap all the time. And to really make it a much more believable scenario, they'll overlap them on purpose. So there'll be baiting, there'll be impersonating, there'll be phishing, there'll be pretexting, all of this to try and come away with a very successful attack.
It seems like impersonation would almost have to come into play with all of these, because anytime, even if it's just a simple phishing email where they're saying, we're emailing from your bank and we need your account information, that's still technically a form of impersonation, right? Because whoever's sending it is not really working for Bank of America.
Right. Yep. They're trying to represent a legitimate Bank of America resource. That's right. Well, I knew a lot of times when you discuss these are the basics of cybersecurity. A lot of times when you discuss this, I think a lot of us are tending to say, I just don't believe you. I don't believe that some of these massive attacks that we have heard about came down to something as silly as a phishing scam. And just to kind of prove this to you, I wanted to provide some real world examples. Keep in mind that when it comes to examples of cybersecurity attacks, we like to go to the big ones, like I'm about to share with you. I'm sure you'll recognize them. One of the reasons we do is because they are fully documented. One of the tricky things about cybersecurity attacks is oftentimes they're not documented. Companies will not be under any obligation to anyone to talk about them, so they do not, right? So you've got this great, well-respected company, someone absconds with millions of their dollars. They're not going to talk about that. They're not going to want their reputation harmed. They're not going to want to convey that information at all. So a lot of the times we discuss major types of attacks because they're well documented. Well, let's go in our time machine right now. I cannot believe it's been this long, but it was in 2013. I would have guessed it was more like 2018 or even 2020 when the Target Corporation breach occurred. Many of us know about this attack. In fact, yours truly was one of the victims. I had a Target account and my account was absconded with. So close to 40 million customers impacted in the Target breach. And guess what? It was spear phishing against someone that was very vulnerable for that type of an attack. It was an HVAC contractor. So here is an individual that's been given privileged access to not only cyber systems, IT systems and, network access inside of Target, but also physical access. And spear phishing is very successful. Let's talk about that for a moment. Spear phishing is not just a random attempt. So a lot of times when we see phishing attacks like in email, you're going to see a Bank of America fake email that was sent to millions just blindly. And what the attacker's clearly trying to do is they're just hoping in the numbers game, a bunch of these recipients will be B of A customers, so they might fall for this. In a spear phishing attack, it's really a higher rate of success because they have investigated you somehow. A classic one is all of these folks that publish wish lists on Amazon, and they will make them publicly accessible. What a great way to gain information about someone. I know that they're buying fitness equipment. I know that they may be buying a certain type of technology just based on that public wish list. So yikes. Spear phishing was done in this case where this individual said, oh my gosh, this is all legit. This is Target employees contacting me. And that led to the Target breach. What did that cost Target? Well, the published cost to Target that that we can get record of is 49 million. 49 million. That was just the legal penalties alone. Estimates that I were reading said the real cost to Target would be in the hundreds of millions. So yeah, they had to pay close to 50 million in penalties, but there was an incredible amount of damages they sustained from, as you might guess, very upset customers saying, that's it, no more Target for me. So big deal. And it started with spear phishing.
Well, like you said, that was 10 years ago now, because it's 2023. So 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talk all the time about how technology is advancing every year, and it's a good thing. But then also that means technology is advancing on the other side of things too. I can only imagine now attacks that are going on now as opposed to 10 years ago and how much more advanced or difficult to detect they might be.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to researching your target to spearfish, there's new and,
Right.
exciting ways, if you want to phrase it that way, to do that.
No end of information that you can find.
Yeah, exactly. You start at someone's LinkedIn
Hmm.
and you move out from there. And think about it. LinkedIn, you're intentionally saying, this is my life.
Right.
At least to work.
Publishing it on purpose. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, Sophia, I didn't want to stay 10 years ago. So let's talk about the Ubiquity attack in 2021. Ubiquity, a big network vendor, highly respected, and 30 million, notice these are estimates, about 30 million customers impacted by the Ubiquity attack. And how did it happen? It happened with social engineering. Here, the cybersecurity, the criminals were doing a fantastic job of impersonating internal Ubiquity employees. They did such a great job that they had the legitimate Ubiquity employees sharing credentials that gained access to the key systems. In this case, there was 39 million roughly in losses. Notice again, that was the reported losses. In this case of Ubiquity's breach, what the computer criminals were after was money, just like in the Target breach, and they got it. So the criminals had initially gotten away with 39 million in transferred funds. Some of that was recouped, but again, the point is these massive, well-publicized breaches all began with that social engineering, which we would, maybe kind of wrinkle our nose at and say, well, no one falls for that anymore. Oh no, that's not the case at all. It's happening all the time. So Sophie, what the heck do we do about it? Well, the great news is we want to educate absolutely everyone in our workplace, every single employee of every single department about what a massive problem this is and how to protect yourself. Things like what Daniel was doing. I'm not giving you any more information until I have a legitimate way to verify you are who you say you are. Another big one is triple checking any information that is presented in front of you, including that email. The first thing that we are trained to do when it comes to emails is look at that source sender, right? I just had someone spearfish me about placing ads on my YouTube site. So I was like, oh, you want to pay me $10,000 for ad placement? Let's go. My greed kicked in there. And so I start engaging with this individual, and then I see they don't have a NordVPN email address. They're not a true NordVPN recipient. So we're going to really inspect every detail to double check information. Something else that we're going to do is we are going to be very careful with what information we share online, right? So that whole public wish list thing, when I heard about that being used in spearfishing, I took it down. Because, I mean, my goodness, who's going to be like, gee, I think I'll buy Anthony a gift today anyways, right? Anyone that's going to be buying me a gift on Amazon, I should keep that kind of private.
After I started working here and doing more of these cybersecurity type courses, I instantly, like my social media, I locked it down because I was like, holy cow.
So, I'm so glad to hear that.
Even just a picture of like, I'm excited. It's my first day at work. Here's the building that I'm going to be working. Even something like that. Like people don't need to know where I'm working. They don't need to know where I'm at. And like immediately I scrubbed all my socials. It was a little bit scary, but that awareness was important.
Yeah. You and I were talking about the popularity of Facebook with the older crowd. And, I'll never forget when Facebook first became popular, those stories you would read, it was so heartbreaking of someone going onto their Facebook saying, family vacation time. And there's the family waving as they're off to the airport and they get robbed.
Yeah,
as a result. So we want to be very careful what we share. We want to maintain a healthy skepticism. And I'm trying to really embrace this because, I don't want to be one of those people that's just constantly like, this is a scam, this is a scam, this is a scam. But you want to have that healthy skepticism. In fact, that reminds me of a joke. the Nigerian prince is often the subject of phishing emails.
Mhm.
And I remember a comedian recently pointing out, like, I feel bad for the real Nigerian prince that's trying to give away his money out there. He's never going to succeed. Another thing, too, is we have to train our internal employees, all of them, to report suspicious activity. This is another huge problem because what will happen is we will properly educate our employees oftentimes. And so they go up phishing, up smishing, up, impersonation attack, and they just ignore it and they don't report it. Oftentimes, our internal cybersecurity teams want to know as much data as possible about any attempted breach in your organization. Here at ACI Learning, we have nefarious, suspicious emails. I'm sure you've seen this, Sophie, that are quarantined by our IT department. The reason why they're not deleted and they're quarantined is so our IT department can inspect those and figure out, is this a random attack or is this a more sophisticated targeted attack that we should be worried about? Another great prevention technique is, and this is, I saved it for last because it is the biggest thing we can do. And it's really the reason for this webinar today. We have to do effective security training on this to every single person in the organization. Absolutely everyone needs this effective cybersecurity training because, as we've alluded to, it is not just the IT department that's going to be under attack. So many of us kind of think that way. Oh, the target breach? Well, they must have gone after the IT systems and found a way in. No, it turns out that as far as this initial security breach that could lead to something bigger, it's often outside of IT. In fact, it may be in departments like sales and marketing or the finance department. Finance department's probably pretty educated these days, but obviously they're a huge target. So we have to educate everyone because that initial breach, look at the target situation where it was a contractor. It wasn't even a full-blown target employee that ended up being that initial vector of attack. So we need to train everyone. We're talking every department, every team member. Something else that we need to do as an organization to really make sure we're safe is we need to assess those individuals. One of the great things that we do here at ACI Learning that I love our IT department for is they will do test attacks. So they will do a phishing email company-wide so that they can get an internal report on who fell for that phishing scam. And when the user falls for the phishing scam, they're not dragged out into our public square and embarrassed or anything like that. What happens is they get some recurring training. They get that additional training that they need because they just fell for a tested attack. The other thing we're going to need with really effective training for all of our employees in this area is we're going to need a way to track that training. We need to make sure that everyone did indeed take it, and that's kind of goes right well with the assessment process. Let's make sure they took it. Let's make sure they understood it. And these are important aspects. And another thing that we're going to want to have in a training program is reporting. So your boss is probably going to want to know, right? The head of the finance department, hey, I need to make sure that all of my finance employees went through the cybersecurity awareness training and all of them were successful in that endeavor. What might effective cybersecurity training include? Well, Sophie, it would hit all the things that we talked about and more. One of the things that we didn't talk about much in this presentation, but it's a big part of this, is passwords.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure our employees are engaging in secure software practices and that secure password practices. And one of the big ones here is password reuse. That you see again and again when you study the major security breaches. They typically occur because there is oftentimes a CEO of an organization that is using the exact same password everywhere in their life for convenience. And sure enough, that gets breached in one location and it overflows.
I remember it used to, when I first started getting online and creating accounts when I was, middle school or a teenager, I used to get kind of irritated when I would create a new account and I'd just make a password and it would be something simple, password one, not that, but something like that, right? That would have been easy to guess.
Yep.
And every time it was your password's not long enough. You don't have enough number. You don't have enough special characters or capital letters. It's not complex enough. Too many dictionary words. I would get so irritated. I'm like, man, who is trying to hack my Webkins account?
Yeah.
And now I have a new appreciation for it because like I don't even make up any of my own passwords anymore. It's random generation. I don't even know what it is half the time because it's just now I'm like paranoid about it. A healthy paranoia, a healthy fear.
Yep.
But there's a reason those password measures are in place that require you to have it be a certain length or certain special characters. It's not because they're trying to annoy you. It's for your safety and your security, right?
Yeah. And we have to evolve. We really do. I remember, decades ago with passwords, I remember one of the things I did, Sophie, was I did come up with a great, super strong password, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, character substitution, all that. But then I did use that everywhere, because decades ago, that wasn't as big of a concern. So just terrible. We need unique passwords. We need to teach our end users all of this stuff. And the great news is here at ACI Learning, we now have training for absolutely everyone in your organization. And to wrap around that training, we have that assessment and those reporting pieces done for you. So it's very much a turnkey solution that we're now offering for every single team member in your organization. And Sophie, I think we have a video that we're going to play, and we certainly want to take everyone's questions. We'll do that. But I guess before we do the question and answers, we're going to play the video, right?
Yes, absolutely. We will get to your questions in just a moment, but just to kind of cover a little bit of what Anthony just mentioned, let's take a look at cyber skills.
ACI Learning is excited to offer Cyber Skills. We've partnered with the best in the industry for cybersecurity awareness training that will help all of your employees become defenders against cyber criminals. Cyber Skills also comes with insights, our new skills gap analysis tool to give you assurance our training is working. Let us help you protect your organization from the ever-evolving threat of cyber attacks.
So we spent quite a bit of time today talking about some cybersecurity topics like social engineering, and Cyber Skills covers stuff just like that. So definitely check it out. But for now, we want to go ahead and get to those questions. We have quite a few lined up already. We're going to start with a question that comes to us from a viewer on YouTube. This person asks, what are the main things we need to consider to protect a WordPress site?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, WordPress. So boy, WordPress is a ubiquitous way in which to deliver content on the web. In fact, my personal blog site, quick plug, ajsnetworking.com. So ajsnetworking.com, that is my blog, and that is a WordPress site. And it's one that I built myself out of AWS, Amazon Web Services. So the biggest thing with WordPress sites that you're going to want to watch out for is plugins. And in fact, there are free tools now that you can obtain that will allow you to have your WordPress site scanned for plugins that present particular vulnerabilities. What a well-timed question, because I actually just did this with my ajsnetworking.com site. And sure enough, one of the plugins that was flagged was one that that I'm no longer using. It was an old plugin that allowed me to offer Q&A. It allowed me to create practice exams inside of my WordPress site. So I was creating multiple choice questions with this tool. I found a better tool, wasn't even using this one. It was still enabled, still in there, and had a security breach potential associated with it. So I would say the number one thing when it comes to your WordPress site is please again, there are free tools to scan the safety of your plugins. Do that. The other big thing with WordPress sites, obviously, is there's lots of ways that your end users can communicate with you. So be watching out for those phishing scams and impersonation scams incoming to your WordPress like we always would.
I feel like there was something recently that we talked about on Technado that had to do with like over 1 million WordPress sites that because of an exposed or exploited plugin, they were now vulnerable to some kind of attack. And that was maybe like a month ago. So it's definitely very relevant.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. WordPress is a unique thing, right? There's the WordPress itself, which is maintained by WordPress Industries or whatever that looks like, right? But it's a very open platform. Open is great, but open also means someone like me is going to create a WordPress plugin for your WordPress site. And I may not have the skill set to create a very secure plugin. So that's dangerous.
We have another question from somebody that's watching on Zoom. And I think we do get questions along this line a lot. This person asks, what is a good roadmap for a beginner in cybersecurity? I think the reason that's such a common question is because it's such an interesting industry. And I feel like that, like for me, it was like immediately, that's interesting. How do I learn more? How do I get started?
Yeah, I think what you did personally is the great way to go. So I know, Sophie, you went out and you got a cybersecurity awareness professional certification. I think that's a great way to start.
I think, well, yeah, it was some kind of it was just a basic cybersecurity, it kind of covered all of the basics because I was still very, very green. I still am and still learning a lot. Right. And working here obviously helped. So, so that was a huge part of it, but I guess, so
and
what?
That was ISACA, right? That was,
it was ISC
squared. So there, Sophie finds this reputable, incredibly important organization to help with cybersecurity training. They have an affordable certification. What a great way to go. Sophie has her first certification in the cyber arena, and it's on these types of topics, which you would have to know. From there, I think you have to then learn the basics. In fact, I just heard one of our content creators here at ACI Learning, not even one of our edutainers, not one of our managers, great talented guy that we have over in the UK named Jordan. Jordan said to me, I think everybody, I won't try his British accent, by the way, that would be Sophie's job. Jordan said to me, you can't avoid the big three. And I was like, the big three? What is he talking about? And sure enough, he said A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So when he said that, I just thought about it. And I'm like, my goodness. Yeah, I would, do something as Sophie did, get some initial certification on cyber because that's what you're really interested in. But then if you don't have the A+ skill set, the Network Plus and the Security Plus skill sets, and I'm assuming you don't because you're just getting started, maybe you're career changing from auto mechanic, great, no problem. We're going to have to get you that A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus as a foundation. Here's why. Very simple. If you don't understand TCP/IP and IP addressing and the way systems communicate, then you're not really going to understand the attacks that are leveraging those types of communication protocols. So I just shudder to think about anyone starting their journey without those big three.
I look at some of the certifications that are available that seem like they'd be interesting to me. And because I've been working here for a couple of years, I'm learning more about IT and cybersecurity, but I'm not I'm not working as like a network administrator or something. I'm not in an IT job, right? So some of these certs, they say, before you go and take this exam, you've got to have like 3 years experience in this field. And for me, it's not feasible at this time, but that doesn't mean I can't still go watch the course and learn more about it. So I watched Pen Test Plus and like Network Plus.
Yep.
And even though I figured, okay, I'm not going to go get that cert just yet. I'm not going to, make that my goal just yet. I still wanted to learn the information. So I just watched whatever was in our library.
Do it.
Just to learn, learn something new.
And here's a tip too. A lot of the certifications will say you need A+ probably says it. The initial level probably says something along the lines of 2 years of experience in information technologies recommended. Ignore that. I mean, you got to start somewhere. So I would highly recommend you ignore that. I would hate to think of someone halting their journey because of that bullet point and they got to find an internship at an IT department somewhere. No, 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 no. They're just recommending that. Go out, study it, take that test. You have to start somewhere. That's the approach I would use.
Yeah. Believe in yourself. Something along those
Exactly.
lines, right? Well, I feel like we do get questions like that a lot because it is an interesting industry and people
Yeah.
want to break into it. So
And one more comment on that. Always make sure, like A+ is a great example. Make sure you download what the exact learning objectives are and go through them, because a lot of times folks can skip the A+ because when they look at the objectives, they do know that already. Okay, so maybe they were, well, an extreme example would be they were fixing computers, right? They were fixing workstations, and now they want to go into the hardcore information technology. Well, they're probably going to be able to skip a bunch of A+ because they were already had a job repairing PCs.
yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit earlier. You went over a few examples of real world attacks that happened. And we have a question from Cindy, who's watching on YouTube, about one of those real world attacks. Cindy asks, how did the Colonial pipeline attack occur? Was that a result of social engineering?
Oh my gosh. The Colonial pipeline attack was a super interesting one, super recent too. I think that happened in like 2021. And here's a couple of interesting things about the Colonial pipeline attack. Number one, yes, the pipeline was shut down, but not by the cyber criminals, thank goodness. So that's one of the big misconceptions about that. The company that runs the pipeline shut it down because of the breach, but the attackers never made it to the IoT infrastructure that controlled the pipeline itself. Thank goodness. That would have been an even bigger headline. So the pipeline was shut down as a precaution. Now, to the great question, how did they get in? Well, it turns out this one wasn't social engineering. So this was one of the ones where it was not social engineering. It was a huge mistake on behalf of the IT team. What had happened was they had an account that had been used for remote access in to check their systems. They no longer needed that account because someone left that was using it. And instead of disabling or deleting that account, something that should have been a hard and fast procedure as far as the security procedures that were followed, they left the account sitting there. The username and password for that account were used by that IT member elsewhere, again, utilizing the same password for everything. And they were able to find the username and password, the attackers, on the dark web. So it was in a list of known administrator level accounts, username and passwords. They tried it. It worked. They were in. That was how that initial breach took place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you heard a lot about that, like in the news and stuff. And for somebody that at the time that happened, I wasn't really as plugged into this stuff and paying as much attention.
Yeah.
Interesting to learn after the fact what exactly that. You see people freaking out about it on Twitter and stuff, but it's interesting to see what actually led to that.
Yeah, exactly. And, notice I said, while it wasn't social engineering, it was certainly close to what we're talking about here. And that is fundamental cybersecurity awareness training, because a reused password was involved in the mix.
Yeah, that'll get you. That'll be your Achilles heel. So we've got another question. This person's watching on LinkedIn, and they ask, do you know of any free training courses for earning certificates?
Wow. Well, we have a free subscription as part of IT Pro, so that's cool. So check out our IT Pro segment where there is a free membership. I can't think of too many others that do a free tier anymore. I mean,
yeah.
I wonder if any of the LinkedIn courses are complimentary. Are they? I think.
I'm not sure. I use LinkedIn Learning quite a bit, but to be honest with you, when I used it, it was because I had access through my school. That was why.
Yes, I use it currently because I created some courses for LinkedIn. So they gave me like this lifetime free membership. So I can't tell what's paid and what's free. But I'm pretty sure. Look, here's what I would do. I would check the large reputable companies. So check LinkedIn Learning. Obviously, check us. I'm here to tell you, we do offer free courses. So go to big reputable vendors like us and LinkedIn Learning and look for that.
And you mentioned that IT Pro offers like a free tier. I think it's like 75 hours. So that's always a good place to start and
Sure
just
is.
start watching some of that training.
Yeah, and something else I think we still do here is it's like cloud weekend. And so
Right.
we'll
Yes,
take
that's
a
right.
bunch of our great cloud training and we'll put it in there. And boy, you talk about binging, but binging in a great way.
There was also the one that I took that was the certified in cybersecurity from ISC Squared. The certification itself or the exam itself, they were doing some kind of a special thing where it was a certain number of people, but it was like a big number, it was like 1 million or something like that, maybe smaller. But it may still be going on. Maybe check that out. It's ISC Squared that was doing it.
That's awesome.
And so the fee, they were waiving the fee for the exam is what it was. And there was also training that they offered.
Wow.
The only thing I had to pay was I had to pay a fee to become a candidate, I think, of ISC Squared. And it was
Yep.
like $50. So
Yep.
not free, but $50 for me. I was like, okay, that's not terribly expensive. It's not hundreds of dollars, right? And they waived the exam fee. So I was able to use this material, study. I used some of our material. I used just some Googling and some of my
Yep.
own research, and then went and took the exam and passed. And it cost me $50. You know, it was not crazy expensive. So
That's so great.
even if it's not free, maybe look for some of the ones that are, they're offering discounts or maybe just a little bit lower priced, I guess.
That's great. Another thing I just thought of too is a lot of vendors check out their websites because their training sections of their websites, because a lot of vendors will do like first course free, you know, so Cisco is one of them, Fortinet, Palo Alto, they'll offer Juniper. A lot of the vendors will offer at least that initial get up to speed with their products course free of charge. So check that out too.
We've got another question coming from, this one comes from YouTube. It's from Mohammed. Mohammed asks, what are the most important factors when it comes to cloud security? And that's like a huge item right now, right?
Yeah. One of the big things that came to mind right away on that excellent question is secure access. I mean, really, that is such a fundamental key. Think about it. When I take a bunch of sensitive information and I put it up in, let's say AWS S3, when I put that in a secured S3 bucket, and then I go up there and I indicate I want the strongest encryption done that AWS can do for me on that data, okay? You can't just then immediately relax. Why can't you? Well, we have to always protect cloud data in 3 phases. Remember this, please. Data at rest, which we just described. Ooh, the stuff in the bucket is perfectly encrypted. No one can read it. Great. That's data at rest. You can't forget about the other 2 factors here. Data in transit and data in use. So one of the things with cloud is don't get into that kind of just mindset of it's in the cloud, it's highly encrypted, I'm all set. That's just the data at rest. As far as getting in to access and use that data and maybe transfer that data to my local workstation, that's where we need to be super intense with great security practices. One of the things I'll do is I'll often virtualize a secure sandbox on my local system, make sure, of course, that we have an secured connection between us and AWS, and only then will I examine that information in the bucket. So I make sure everything is completely secured. There's some companies that have such sensitive information in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform that they will buy a dedicated circuit to the cloud. That is becoming more and more popular. There's Azure Direct Connect, AWS Direct Connect, Google has a similar Direct Connect where you have a private line right into the cloud. And boy, if you can afford to do that, that would be the ultimate in cloud security.
I feel like I've definitely heard about how utilizing a cloud solution like that can sometimes make security a little bit more hands-off, I guess, for the person that needs it because you're relying on the provider for some of that. But one of the things that I know I've talked about before, and of course I did with Daniel, about intro to AWS pen testing.
Yes.
And pen testing, I guess, is a little bit different. But one of the things we talked about is because you're dealing with a cloud provider and their own security measures, you have to be so careful with what you're doing because you're not just talking about the security of your own stuff. If you're pen testing and you break something, you might be breaking their system, and that's bad.
Exactly right. Exactly right. What we have with cloud, it's so unique, is it is what's called a shared responsibility model. So there are responsibilities that Sophie is in charge of, and then there's responsibilities that let's say Amazon, AWS is in charge of. So one of the first tasks for Sophie is to really make sure she's aware of, okay, what stuff am I responsible for and what stuff is AWS responsible for? And by the way, so many people are afraid to go to the cloud because of security, but maybe they shouldn't be, because if you get really good at knowing what your responsibility is and their responsibility is, then you can leverage the fact that they're doing a bunch of the security for us. You know, we mentioned in this episode, in this webinar, we mentioned tailgating, right? Well, go visit one of the Amazon Web Service data centers and you can't tailgate. There's no such thing as tailgating because they have a sophisticated man trap that doesn't allow tailgating into that facility. They probably have retinal optical scans that you have to do, or fingerprint scans, biometrics before you can get in. And we probably couldn't afford that as an organization. So notice what we're doing. We're leveraging the AWS unlimited monetary budget, it seems like, to have the greatest security in place.
Man trap, just so I remember, that's where like you go in through the first door and then you're in like a little room, right? And you can't open that second door till the first door is shut behind you.
Totally stops the tailgating. Man trap is also the name of my hairdressing outfit. It's called the man trap. It's men's haircuts.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know this. I couldn't remember exactly what it meant.
It's why when I saw it in the phone book, when I actually saw it driving by and I'm like, oh my gosh, got to go there.
That was a sign.
Cybersecurity term. Yep.
So we've got another question that has to do with courses that we might offer. This one comes from Garrett, who's watching on LinkedIn. Garrett asks, what courses do you offer that lead to job prospects or that can be leveraged for an increase in pay?
Well, I'll tell you, I would say it really does start at A+. There's a great story by one of our, I'm not going to mention them by name because I didn't get his or her permission to talk about them on this webinar, but it is one of my favorite stories. We have an IT employee here, and that IT employee is sailing in their career. Like the trajectory has been so great. They're so happy. It's just so great to see. And are they certified? Sure, they're certified. And it was A+ and Network+. That's it. So I love that story because so many of our students convince themselves that, well, I need to do A+, Network+, Security+. I then need to do CCNA, CCNP. I then need to do, oh my goodness, I have to do some Palo Alto firewall training. I have to get certified in DevOps. And then I think I'll sit for the Cisco Certified Internetwork Expert Security exam. And now I'll be ready for my career in IT. Again, I want to go back to one of our cherished IT employees here at ACI Learning. They did A+, they did Network+, they got in the door, and their career skyrocketed.
Because so much of that comes too probably from just getting that experience while you're working in the job. Maybe that training and that cert gets you in the door. And once you're there, if you want to continue that training and getting certs, that's awesome. But there's so much that you probably can pick up just in on-the-job training, right?
Absolutely. That's what this is. In fact, I even said to them, you're not going to get any more certs. Come on, dude. In fact, you could get them for free. We'll pay for them here at ACI Learning. Nope, I'm good. They're constantly learning on the job, as you said, Sophia. So no more certs for them. No soup for you.
Probably depends on the person, depends on the company, depends on the job.
Totally.
That you're in, right?
I'm a cert addict. Okay. First step is admitting it. I am addicted to taking these certifications. It's one of the reasons I have so many.
So A+ is a gateway cert is what you're saying?
That's exactly what happened.
Well, I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this discussion. We're just about out of time. But thank you, Anthony, for going over some of this good information about cybersecurity training, intro to some of this stuff. And thank you, of course, for joining us for this ACI Learning webinar. We'll see you next time.